Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm back with another video. It is July 14th. It's a Tuesday, 2026. And everybody's talking about Lindsey Graham and the circumstances around his strange, untimely death. So I thought I would add my voice to the litany of confusion here. So I'll be reading the most of the text that I've included below in my Substack. So there are many explanations of Graham's sudden demise. One commenter, there's rumors of his dissolute life undermining his health. So one commenter said that he died of an overdose of Viagra and cocaine, which seems to be viable. Hereditary factors. It said that his father died of a heart attack at age 69, and often family health dysfunctions play a factor in somebody's life path. I think that the way a family raises its children to be either healthy or not healthy, I think does have an effect on them. I know in my own case, I grew up with a mother who fed us healthy, balanced diet, didn't give us too much sweets, and generally was very careful of our health. And my father was a dentist, so I just went to the dentist today to have a one tooth replaced, and it's not even an implant, but just a prosthetic. And he said, I said, I don't think I really need a really serious treatment here. And he said, I'll be 78 years old this month. And he said, for a 78-year-old, your teeth are perfect. So, and I think the reason for my apparent reasonably good health and no need to take medications and so on is because I was taught at an early stage to live a healthy life. And I have not done the things that got me into trouble. And I think that Lindsey Graham was not taught those things. So I'll just make that as a factor. And I include this as another factor, which is corollary to this, is that there are spiritual factors. So he was accused of being heartless, and given his obvious venomous attacks on his perceived opponents, his heart was filled with hatred and greed. He was after the money, and he just fueled that by spewing hatred. Now, it's true that people like Henry Kissinger and the Rockefellers and George H.W. Bush all lived into their 90s. So this is not an ironclad law. It's not necessarily true that the wages of sin are death. But in Lindsey Graham's case, there was probably a contributing factor. Now, it said that he died of aortic dissection, a tear in his aorta, the main artery of the body, which is fatal. So, and it's entirely possible that that is the immediate cause of his death. But the question I ask is, what caused the tear? What caused this aortic dissection? So I was doing some research on this, and I came across a couple of interesting articles. This one is from PBS, Public Broadcasting of the U.S. It's a quasi-public broadcast system. It does get government funding, I think, but it also gets a lot of corporate funding, and it also gets funding from the public. So anyway, given all that, they asked the question about Lindsey Graham's sudden death spurs false claims. Was he actually murdered? So this is what they say. This is baseless. Graham, who was 71, died following a tear in his aorta, according to a preliminary medical examiner finding shared by his office. An official cause of death will be disclosed after toxicological and microscopic testing. So it's not exactly clear what the cause of the cause was. In my understanding, causes have causes. So we can't say that just because he died of an aortic tear that there wasn't something else going on. Now, The tear in the inner wall of his aorta, called an aortic dissection, was related to the hardening of Graham's arteries, probably related to the hardening of his heart. And the findings stated the office originally said he had suffered from a brief and sudden illness. Well, whatever that means, that's a very nebulous term. But many social media posts blame countries, including Russia, which I'll be getting to that in a minute, Iran. And of course, he was vitriolic in his condemnation of Iran, and Iran has been, vowing vengeance against its enemies. It could have been Iran, it could have been Ukraine, because Ukraine likes to kill a lot of people, as does Israel. They both have a track record of assassinations. So there may have been a kind of a backward, motivation for Ukraine, possibly is, if he was killed, they could say to Trump, you see, this is how bad Russia is. So you really have to give us those missiles, and we've got to defeat Russia because they just killed Lindsey Graham. Except that Ukraine may have killed Lindsey Graham in order to and pinned it on Russia. I mean, they're not beyond stuff like that, nor is Israel. So the article goes on to say, Graham inspected a drone factory in Ukraine yesterday, reads one popular post on X Sunday. That is absolutely true. There's a picture of him fondling a drone. Russia blew up that facility today. Then tonight it is announced that Graham is dead of a sudden illness, quote unquote. No more details. I'd say there's a decent chance that Russia blew up Lindsey Graham. So the question that I ask is the aortic dissection actually related to a bodily dissection of getting blown to bits? Who knows? Now, another post on the platform says, in reference to Israel's National Intelligence Agency, most realistic, it was a Mossad job in order to push Trump to renew full-scale war on Iran. It clearly means you are next. So it was a backdoor threat to Trump by killing Lindsey Graham. These people, remember, Benjamin Netanyahu gave Trump a golden, what are those things that they had 5,000 of these, a beeper thing that notifies you. They gave 5,000 of these Mossad-made messengers found their hands into Hezbollah, and they all blew up, and 5,000 people were either killed or injured. And Netanyahu gave Trump a gold one. So was he giving a subtle warning to Trump? Be careful who you take messages from. Who knows? Not that I'm trying to spread conspiracy theories here. Another post on the platform states, in reference to Israel's National Intelligence Agency, he says, most realistic, I guess I'm repeating myself, most realistic, it was a Mossad job in order to push Trump to renew full-scale war with Russia. And Lindsey Graham was the shadow of Trump, his black self. Then we have a noted foreign policy hawk. Graham was one of those most influential figures in Washington on international affairs, and he advised Trump on matters such as the Iran war and Russia. On Friday, Graham had announced an agreement with the Trump administration to move forward on a package of Russia sanctions during a trip to Ukraine. I just saw that one of his backers, one of Graham's backers, just said that we want to pass that package of Russian sanctions in honor of Lindsey Graham. So Lindsey Graham gave himself for the greater good. He was also one of those chief backers of the Trump's war in Ukraine, having advocated for years for direct confrontation between Washington and Tehran. So Graham was a strong ally of Israel, whose position towards the war in Gaza is, in particular, angered many in the Middle East, including U.S. allies, who had advocated a diplomatic solution. But Graham was never in favor of diplomatic solutions. He was always in favor of brute force or dirty tricks or whatever. Other posts on social media argue that it would have been impossible for Graham to get home from Ukraine in time to die in Washington, and question whether FBI activity at Graham's house indicated that there is more to his death than was reported. Larry Johnson, who is one of the, in my opinion, one of the better independent commentators, just made a post in which he said that the timeline is such that Graham could not have possibly gotten back in time to have died in his home. He probably died before then. Now, FBI Director Kash Patel wrote in an X post on Sunday morning that the FBI is assisting local authorities and has made every necessary resource available. Well, what does the FBI have to do with a medical examination? Oftentimes when the FBI gets involved, it's to cover something up, not to reveal anything. So you have to wonder about that. So he said, asked for further comment on Monday, the FBI said it has nothing to add. So the sudden death of a high-profile, polarizing figure like Lindsey Graham is especially fertile ground for conspiracy theories, in part because it generates intense emotional reactions: shock, grief, anger, even relief, or Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is the feeling of happiness at the expense of another. I have seen people, this is not Schadenfreude, this is jumping for joy. Many people, were so appalled by Lindsey Graham as a person. So this woman, Callie Colney, an assistant professor of communication at the University of Kentucky, said, under these circumstances, a dramatic explanation about Graham's death, for instance, that a foreign adversary was involved, might simply feel more compelling or more emotionally satisfying than the reality of an aortic dissection. But that still doesn't answer the question of what caused the aortic dissection. Now, moving on here, the question I have is, did Russia do it? Well, there are a couple of theories based on the fact that he had been officially designated as a criminal and a terrorist by the Russian government. After all, Lindsey Graham had said that every dollar spent in Ukraine is killing Russians, and that's a good thing. So, and he was apparently under, possible indictment by the Russian government. In other words, he was on their wanted list for trial because of his criminal attitude. And don't forget, Lindsey Graham was in Ukraine, egging on the Ukrainian Nazis. So he does have a lot of responsibility for what has gone on in Ukraine, and he could easily be considered to have been a war criminal. So there's I've got a link to an article about a Russian sociologist who says that he may have been targeted. And one theory is that if he wasn't just blown to bits in that attack on the drone factory, it's possible that, this is a pure speculation, of course, that there was some kind of delayed poison that was given to him, not given, but he was subjected to poisoning while on the train trip between Kiev and Poland, because you can't get a direct flight from Kiev, or it's impossible to get a flight out of Kiev, and certainly not one direct to the United States. So it's a possibility. I'm saying this is, I would call this circumstantial evidence that it may be that Russia poisoned, some Russian agent poisoned him. Let's recall that Russia has said to Western diplomats, get out of Kiev, because we've had it with you guys. You've broken all your agreements to us. You're complicit in attacks on our country, on Russia, they're saying. And so the gloves are coming off. And if you have people in Kiev or in Ukraine, they're not going to be safe anymore because they are complicit in this crime against Russia, according to the some Russians thinking. So what I will say is I try to look at things from a kind of a wider point of view. And, I studied German in college, and there's a very famous play called about Dr. Faustus. And it turns out that Dr. Faust was a man who made a deal with the devil. And the deal was that he would gain great wealth and power by having this deal with the devil, but at the end of the term, the devil would come and take him. And this is a person. What's really interesting to me is that even though we live in a Judeo-Christian culture, you hear the word karma bandied about not infrequently. And there's the saying, karma's a bitch. In other words, cause and effect. You're responsible for your actions. In one way or another, the universe is going to get back at you for the bad things that you did. And so if we look at it from a cosmic point of view, or from a Mephistopheles point of view, where the devil comes and takes you away because, you had your fun, Lindsey Graham, but sorry, the bill is due and you're going to go. So I think that that's probably the safest, most inclusive explanation of how Lindsey Graham died. The fact that he died shortly after he left Ukraine does raise eyebrows as to possible circumstantial evidence regarding Russian involvement. But Lindsey Graham made a lot of enemies. That's the reality of it. And when you make that many enemies, and many of these are powerful enemies, and they're enemies that are underhanded, that will do anything they want, and everyone is expendable essentially. It's possible that he was killed, and it's also possible that he simply lived a dissolute life. He probably did not take good care of his health, and his aorta broke. So we don't really know the answer to these questions. We may never know, but I'll just say that the universe decided at some point that it was time for Lindsey Graham to go to hell and meet his friend John McCain. So that's what I have to say about Lindsey Graham, and I wonder what you guys think about it. You can comment below or give me a like or a share. I always appreciate that. You can go to my store where I have my information billboard T-shirts, where you can spread crazy ideas like peace is a good idea. We shouldn't. The United States has been involved in wars 230 out of its 250 years. Maybe it's time to break that habit. So anyway, thank you for supporting my channel. Please, as I say, like and share it. And I will look forward to talking with you soon in the next video.